Hello everyone, welcome back into the studio. Today we are going to start a new project, a long journey hopefully, and I'll get back to explaining what I mean by all that later on in this video. This tutorial is going to be on how to sculpt a small-scale maquette in oil-based clay as an exploration of the design that you're thinking of making at a larger scale. Let's get into it. The first task at hand is going to be to make an armature, and this is no easy or simple task to explain or to do. Depending on the sculpture you're planning to make, the armature is going to have to be designed differently. I'll be doing this design, which is a 3-figure composition, yet I'll only make one armature for one of the 3 figures. The armature is simple, 2 aluminum wires wrapped together at the center, creating a little stick figure man. The size of the figure is of course up to you, but my figure is around 20 centimeters tall. This means that the wrapped section should cover around 5 to 6 centimeters, with the middle of the figure resting more or less at the bottom of the wrapped section, this being essentially the crotch, which is the middle of most figures. To keep the armature from falling over and from bending at the legs, I'll attach it to the wooden board with an armature support arm. This arm will enter into the hips or hip of the sculpture and leave me with legs that are not drilled and glued into the base. This is pretty nice since it means that I can move the legs as the work progresses. It's much more flexible and easy to make changes with this armature setup as opposed to one where the legs are already attached into the base. The stick figure armature is then attached to the support using zip ties. And if the figure was bigger, I would use something stronger like a hose clamp, but since we're working in such a small scale, it means we have very little room inside our figure. To help the clay stick to the armature wire, I use a thinner wrapping wire to cover the armature. This keeps the clay from sliding around on the armature and helps make the sculpting process a wee bit smoother for us. Nothing is more annoying than clay that doesn't want to stay where we put it. Important point to make as well, I guess, is the gauge of the wire. And it's about 4 millimeters for the figure, 8 millimeters for the support arm, and 2 millimeters for the wrapping wire. And all the wire is aluminum, of course. These gauges of wire are not 1000% necessary. You can use something else, but just in case you were wondering. Let's talk sculpting material. I've elected to go for Chevant Le Beau Touché here. This is an oil-based clay from Chevant that is very soft and therefore good for quicker and looser work. It can certainly hold detail as well, but compared to some other of Chevant's offerings, this clay is very soft, which suits what this sculpture is going to be and how I intend for it to look. Since the clay never dries, you can leave it sitting on your shelf forever pretty much. It'll get dusty and dirty, and there's no easy way for you to clean it. Remember that if you choose to work in oil-based clay, it's likely that the work is going to have a mold made of it in order for the work to survive. The clay is soft, but even so I've decided to heat it up a bit. I'm using a little space heater sitting off to the side, and the clay is laid out on some aluminum foil and the heater is then aimed at it. You can use a toaster oven, a microwave, or a strong heat lamp to heat the clay as well. This is a 3-figure composition, and as we progress this project into larger and more complex scales, we will start making 3 armatures, one for each figure. But for this smaller sculpture, however, which is only going to be 20 centimeters tall, I've decided to try my luck with 1 figure armature for the standing figure, while the kneeling figure and the reclining figure are going to be made with no armature. Considering there are already plenty of drawings in the round of this composition, which you can see here, we'll talk more about this later. But considering this, why make a maquette at all? How things fit together in a drawing is not always going to directly translate into real 3-dimensional space. A draftsman doesn't have to contend with how the back of his drawing actually looks, because he doesn't have to draw it, and can easily cheat things in order to make something fit better. Say, essentially have 2 arms reach each other, but in order for them to reach each other, if there was, say, the buttocks there, in this instance, the arms would have to go through the buttocks in order to stay proportional and not become too long. I decided to make a maquette, not to pretend like I'm the designer of this composition. As you can see, I'm clearly not the designer of this composition, but to better understand the composition in 3 dimensions and look for any downfalls or risks. As you can see, as far as sculpting goes, I'm really not following my regular process to the extent that I'd normally would. There's no box and egg, but instead I instantly went for more mass that represents a more comprehensive figure. There is still a center line here, but it's retroactively applied over the top of what I've already made. I'm getting the full figure up here rather quickly, and even though I'm only working from one view, at least for now, I'm at peace with that. The back of the sculpture is probably a right mess at the moment, but that's okay. This is a one-day sculpture, pretty much done in 2-3 hours, so a little looseness and roughness is to be expected, and we'll get to the back later on. A very guided process is sort of like an algorithm, or you can envision it like an algorithm that you can run your sculpture through. It's not a guarantee for success, not at all, but it does offer a certain amount of control over the end result and ensures that it's not random and that the fight to get there is as easy as possible. So while I sculpt away here and sort of mess about in the clay, which is really what is going on, I might as well discuss a bit more about what this project actually is. This is going to eventually, hopefully, be an over life-size sculpture of a Michelangelo design passed down to us in Tintoretto and some Naldini drawings. Perhaps there are other drawings of this design, but those are the ones that I know about anyway. This 20 centimeter tall maquette will be the first study, and we've discussed the intent of this study already. The next step will be to make a 40 centimeter tall maquette, more detailed and ideally with the composition fairly settled at that point. Then a scale model will be made. The scale model will be 3 times the size of the 40 centimeter tall maquette, which will make it half the size of the final over life-sized version. The scale maquette will be right around 120 centimeters tall. And then the scale maquette will be enlarged to twice its size, scaled up as it were, and that's how I'll arrive at the final 240 centimeter tall version. This will all be done in clay, and molds will be made to create castings of all of these sculptures. My goal is to have the entire process from start to finish, including all the molds and the casts, and of course all the sculpting and the drawing, up here on Patreon for you to follow along and learn from. We're going to get to cover a lot of ground that we haven't covered yet doing this. A reclining figure, being a major one that many of you have asked for, but we'll also do a partially kneeling figure. The kneeling figure is built starting with the legs and working my way up to the pelvis. There are specific places where I'd like this figure to interact with the other figures, and those things I have to keep in mind. For example, the kneeling figure's right knee is meant to be pressed into the reclining figure's upper abdomen, right on the inside of the costal cartilage of the ribcage, though there is some wiggle room here if I need to make some changes. This means that from here is going to be a good place to start, since the other knee interacts with the base and thus can be placed a bit more randomly. The upper body of the kneeling figure interacts with the thigh of the standing figure, passing underneath it. This does of course mean that how the pelvis is constructed needs to function with this interaction in mind. The final piece of the puzzle which needs to function for me to be satisfied is that the kneeling figure and the standing figure needs to interact psychologically. This does of course mean that they need to look at each other. This is somewhat hard to accomplish because of the pose, and any small mistake could force one of the figure's heads to be turned really awkwardly to accomplish this psychological connection. I think that for the drama of the composition to really function, for the drama to be as impactful as I wish it to be, the two figures that are fighting really need to look each other in the eyes. There's no doubt in my mind that a lot hinges on this psychological interaction between the two figures, and without this connection there will be no drama and no successful sculpture. When doing a first draft of a composition like this, it's very often that the first attempt fails to deliver what you expected because you simply don't know where the problems are going to lie, especially if the composition is complicated. A slight alteration in scale could make a major impact here. If the kneeling figure is too large, too long, he'll end up too far behind the standing figure, and the two won't be able to look at each other in the eyes without having one turn their head almost backwards. One more interaction between the standing figure and the kneeling figure is the arm in the back. This one I'm, however, a little bit more flexible about in terms of what I want to see. Arms can move quite a lot, And unless I really bungle up the relationship in position and scale between the two figures here, I'm going to be able to get the arms to interact somehow. Because of how flexible this interaction is, I'm not too worried. I think I'll be able to come up with something cool, even if it won't be possible to be accurate to the reference drawings. But I'm not too concerned, frankly, with being accurate to the reference drawings. Those are more jumping off points, and I'm obviously sticking to them quite a bit, but I'm not concerned if something is a little bit different. That's it for this month's video. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you learned a thing or two that you can take with you into your own practice from this video. Please let me know what you thought about the video in the comments below, and until next time, stay creative.